Thank you.
Any other questions or concerns?
Because of saying that.
Seeing none, thank you.
People run a stick.
Next on our agenda is item number 7.
Yes, Madam Chair, and item number 7 is concerning the business plan for the Phoenix Center Garage. One of the things in this whole process of the settlement agreement for the Phoenix Center Garage, we realize that it's been such a long time, and there's so many different things, and parts of this process have been carried on that a lot of people wanted to ask questions. So we are in the process of drafting a frequently asked questions. And on that, one of the things that the question is, says, does the city have a business plan? Well, yes, we do. And we wanted to make sure that you knew what that was, Council. And it is a draft done by our finance director, done on the basis of conjecture, because some of the things in terms of potential revenue sources or expenditures are based upon estimates for what we know right now. So he's prepared to give that to you as a draft. We want to get your input on that, see if there's any questions. And then once we do that, we will truly be able to answer that question on the frequently asked question, which is being revised, and it will say, yes, we have a business plan, and we'll have a business plan that we can, it's in your packet so that you can see. So Mr. Williams is here to present that, and we will release that FAQ once it has been revised, knowing that that question about the business plan has been answered. Mr. Williams, would you step forward?
I do want to stress that this is an initial draft. It's not the final document. We'll be updating it on a weekly basis, and there will be more changes in the weeks coming. If you look at the overall index, you'll see it's broken down into several areas. We have an executive summary, followed by a business overview, then the mission statement, organizational values, description of the business, alignment with the city goals, which is important, and key trends and challenges. And then the second section is the finance plan and technology plan. If you would all turn to page 12, you will see initial projections, revenue and expenses for the first 5 years. If you'll turn to page 13, you'll see some of the assumptions that were made, and these need to be updated a little more. It explains what the short-term parking days are, hours are, how many cars per day, rates per hour, etc. And those are all broken out in the assumptions. Of course, the first key assumption, which I don't have listed here, which I have to add, is the $16.3 million for the settlement agreement on the Phoenix Center. That work has to be completed before this business plan can be put into action. So the first step is going to be that we complete all the repairs and renovations that we said that we're going to make. If you look at the page 12, you'll see that we're projecting that we know that the number of cars we can have in the facility, because a certain number of spots have already been allocated for Ottawa Towers, both the Ottawa Towers. We have 800 spots that we can utilize for parking, for public parking. And in year 5, we're making the assumption that all 800 spots are being used. Now again, depending on some of the other assumptions, that number can change. As an example, 140 South Saginaw, if that building was renovated and rented out, and we calculate they would need, Vince, about 463 spots, I think? 463 spots, then that 5-year period may come down to year 3. It would move up a little bit for the 800 spots to be full. It's just a projection right now, but on the current projection, we're looking at year 5. And in there, we included both the short-term parking, long-term parking, the Erebus income, which is for the Halloween event, and any event income that we may have on the amphitheater level. And again, these are just, projections. We've gone through all the expenditures based on past history, as well as talking to other people, and we have it broken down for subcontracted labor, utilities, maintenance, property insurance, etc. So when you look at the number we're looking from a cash flow basis. Now, and a lot of people never understand what depreciation is, which is a non-cash item. So we're going to only look at it from net income, from operations, from operating costs before depreciation. And we can see that in the first year, we would have to transfer in $200,000 from the general fund. 98,000 in year 2, 15,000 in year 3, but in year 4, we would have a surplus of 152,000 before depreciation, and in year 5, 436,000. So what we're really saying is that we're going to have a break even in a little over year 3 from a cash standpoint. And then we would have to add on the depreciation, which is about $800,000 a year, the non-cash item, which is depreciation, which takes the asset and retires it over its useful life, which is the purpose for the depreciation. I have also brought in other potential revenue streams, if you look on page 14. Retail shops on the amphitheater level. And then on page 16, another thing we would have to do is to build an access ramp on the north side, because right now, to get from the ground floor to the amphitheater, there's no way to get up there unless you take the elevator, which if you're going to have retail shops on the top floor, that will not work. They would have to build a ramp there. And the third is something that a lot of cities are doing now with their off-street parking is urban farming, where they're growing different fruits and vegetables within the parking garages to feed the underprivileged in the city, and that's taking place in many cities right now. Again, this is just their preliminary draft. Now, what's the mission statement? The mission statement is on page 5 of the parking services: to own, operate, and maintain an off-street parking facility, the Phoenix Center Parking Garage, that meets the transportation, planning, development, and financial goals of the city of Pontiac. Now, I'm working with several people, including Vince, on updating this information, and in the next week or two, we will have some updated information, including some additional assumptions and numbers that will be added. Questions?
Any questions or concerns, Councilman Williams?
What next?
Did you remember this is the county seat?
Beg your pardon?
Did you remember that this is Pontiac's the county seat?
Okay.
And technically, the farmers market should be located here in the city? And that could be another input into that.
Sure. Sure.
Thank you.
Again, these are all potential, these are all,
Pontiac?
I guess I actually had a couple. I was listening to you very carefully. The Ottawa Towers has either 2,800 parking places or 2,600. One or the other. I'm not bringing that to you, but Ottawa Towers have that they needed 2,600.
it's 2,800, I believe, $1,400 for the north and the south towers.
Yes,
But there's 250 spots that are already being used and allocated by
by the
a
state of Michigan,
right.
correct. Because I'm looking at, I'm reading the factual data, and it says when fully leased, Ottawa Towers needs 2,600 parking places. So somehow the numbers don't work. No matter, there's zero for us if the city has anything in it. Secondly, Warco Holding, I mean, it's Brooks Patterson's daughter. Is Lot 9 available, or is Lot 9 not available?
Lot 9.
It's not available.
Okay.
We, for those kinds of questions in terms of actual practical numbers for writing the settlement agreement, that's not the finance director's purview. But we do have here Vince DeLeonardis, who is our owner's rep, who is familiar with the terms of the settlement agreement and the spacing. And I must also say to you that the numbers that you have don't incorporate, are dynamic numbers, because it depends on what is leased out. It also is the fact that we now have some other developers who are developing projects near the Phoenix Center Garage, who are actually waiting for us to get this settlement agreement on the way, because they already want to do parking agreements with the city. So we have, in fact, one developer who wants to pay us for doing 400 spaces, but until we get the settlement agreement going, they can't finalize that parking agreement, but there are others who want to do the same thing. So we don't have to go to the details of the numbers
no.
right now, but I must say to you
Okay.
No, there will
Yes,
be
the
numbers.
question.
in which we can-
Answer that
Okay.
question that he
Vince
asked.
can answer
If
that,
he
but I
can't
asked
answer
part
that
of it.
question, it's okay, because there's asinine to be part of a lawsuit for something that has no benefit to the residents at all, and there's no parking available. So it's an idiotic lawsuit that the city went through over 7 times and lost 7 times. So therefore, there's no benefit. So it needs to be revisited to a judge before even talk about having bonds.
Well, just that presumption that we need to revisit the judge. Revisit the judge means we go back
You-
and default on an
you
agreement.
made the
the
lawsuit
council
yourself.
signed. I did not. The
It's-
the emergency manager brought us into the lawsuit, and it went on for a while before he realized that the Ottawa Towers owners, whoever resided there, had perpetual easement rights. It took us a while to work through that, but I can have Vince come forward, and he knows more about the numbers. And in fact, further down on your agenda today, we do have we are responsible now for maintaining that. That's our property, that's our.
I need Mr. Navardi to come up and finish so we can move this
You
forward.
can come and answer the other part of that question. I was just trying to
Thank
give
you.
you some additional
No
information.
problem.
All right.
I'm good.
You have a minute and 40 seconds to finish this. Go.
On the number of cars that are required for Ottawa Towers as part of the settlement agreement, okay, that with approximately 500,000 square feet of space, it's approximately 1,700 spaces are anticipated to be required. In a settlement agreement, there is a number of 1,800 parking passes being required to be provided by the city to Ottawa Towers.
Yes.
Now, all of this, when you go back to the original understanding of why the Phoenix Center was built, and that was to provide parking for the development of those Ottawa Towers. And by having that parking developed, it will allow the Ottawa Towers to reach its potential of leasing all that space, bringing jobs down to the city, approximately 2,000 jobs between Ottawa Towers and South 140 Saginaw. And that way, the city would meet its obligation to provide that parking in accordance with the settlement agreement and help bring jobs downtown to help the other development in the city. That is the intent. The Ottawa Towers Phoenix Center is one of the original P3 agreements that have been executed in this area. When you look, going back to 1980, it was really on the forefront. And that's why all this development is tied to that Phoenix Center parking structure.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes. And with the business plan, it does indicate how revenue can be generated to help offset costs.
As you stated, it is a draft, and you're still working on this draft. So, okay, thank you for the presentation. Moving to the next thing on the agenda is recognition of elected officials.